So today we're talking about flat feet, or that pes planus. I obviously am not going to be able to recreate this foot, but in essence what you're looking at with this foot is that the medial arch, this part here, is really flat with the ground. It's in contact with the ground. In fact, oftentimes a bone in there called the navicular will be in contact with the ground, even though that's supposed to be the apex of the arch. It's supposed to be the very top of that arch. Now there's a couple of mechanisms that are associated with this, and one is that a posterior tibialis muscle that inserts on that same bone has gotten weak, and that's allowed the arch to drop. The other component is at the bottom of the foot, you've got a material that goes from here all the way to the ball of the foot called the plantar fascia. The thought is that that's gotten lax as well. Now, the controversy in this is that a lot of people are told that the reason that they have arch-related pain is because of one of these or both of these being a big issue or being the big problem. However, the argument that I make is that most often it's just not the case if you listen to the history. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So what we have here is a simple graph. You're looking at load versus time. And load is going to be measured by way of a few different things. One is the sheer amount of force you're putting through the foot. So that would be your weight. It would be any additional weight, such as squats, things that you're lifting. So that is load in its purest form. Then you also have the repetition, so how often you're lifting that weight. So if I do 10 squats, that's going to be more load than if I do one squat. And then the last component that a lot of people don't really pay as much attention to is going to be the speed at which you load. So are you loading over a few seconds, or are you going to load that foot over milliseconds, such as a jump, as compared to the squat, which would be that slower movement. So those are your three main components of load. And then time is looking at anything from the day all the way up to what has been done over the previous month. Now what we see is if you start off at a certain level of load and then you just slowly increase that load, you're pretty good. Your body has a chance to adapt. The muscles can get stronger, the ligaments can get stronger on a structural level, and the bone can even get thicker to handle that. What ends up hurting people is where they started a load and then they very rapidly increase the amount of load over a very short period of time. And in this case, what ends up happening is an increased risk of, at minimum, pain, but sometimes even injury. And that's what we're trying to avoid here with a nice steady increase in load. If we listen to the history of a lot of people with foot pain, whether it's related to flat feet or not, is that they have an increase in load. And that can be, again, the amount of weight being put through, the amount of repetitions with that weight, or the speed at which that force is being applied to the foot.
Okay, so we've talked about the time and dosage plot, and you can see that never once in there did I mention the falling of the arch or flat-footedness. And that's again because oftentimes you're born that way. It's not something that came out of the blue. Now, it is unfortunately easier for healthcare practitioners to say that the reason that you have your pain is because you are flat-footed. It's a lot harder for us to say that the reason that you have pain is because you didn't appropriately increase your dosage with whatever the activity is, or that it's a result of that increase in dosage that has made it so that the bone is a little bit different shaped on the inside molecular level, or that the structure of the plantar fascia is not as good as it could be because it hasn't had time to adapt to that new amount of load it gets, or even that the fibers within posterior tibialis are not as strong as they could be because they also didn't have the time to really build up the strength for the functional activity. Now, one of the best things you can do with a new onset of pain, especially with a flat foot or other foot types that are related to increases in dosage, are going to be cushioning it and backing off the load. Not getting rid of the load, but backing it off. Now that being said, there are also some muscles that we can have problems with that really limit the ability of the muscles to take force off the structures of the foot, such as the bones and the plantar fascia. I'm going to give you two specific with this video, but know that there are others out there that can also be used to help offset some of the load that the foot is taking when they're working correctly. So let's talk about some of these exercises. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is posterior tibialis.
And it's a muscle that starts right around this area, stays real close to the bone here, comes right around the corner or that medial malleolus, and then goes right into the navicular, or the top of the apex of most people's arches. In this case, I'm going to use a band. It's going to be tied up so that when the band is taut, it's somewhere around 45 degrees. That gives us the right amount of pull. Now, the reason for that is as I push, or as I swing the band, which is going to go around the ball of my foot, like that, as I swing it this way, the tension on the band is going to want to pull the foot up like this. I'm going to use posterior tibialis to try to keep that foot down. I'm going to use that muscle the entire time, and I'm going to use that as my fatigue point. So what you want to do is you want to slide your foot in, which is going to use posterior tibialis, especially if you keep that first right down on the ground as best you can. Now, if you allow that toe to just kind of come up and the inside of your foot to come up, what you really end up doing is just working the hamstrings, which are responsible for this motion when you're not doing anything with the foot. So it really is putting that inside portion of your arch down on the ground as you do it. All right, here's one more exercise for this type of foot.
So in this case, what we're looking to do is we're looking to make the arch short. So I basically do that by just contracting the muscles inside of my ankle. Now you'll see it's a little bit hard to get all of the muscles of the upper ankle to turn off. So don't worry about it if it kicks on. But what you're trying to do is make that ankle, or that foot, sorry, as short as possible. And you just slide it in. Now the key is to not use your toes to do it, because you have long extensors that go from the toes on the back side of the foot all the way up to the leg. Working this part doesn't help the foot at all. So what we want to do is we want to try to do that same motion without using those. So we're just contracting up the foot. Now the cheat you can do is, if you want, really raise your toes. That's going to shorten your foot. And then from there, try to get them to relax so that you can move them without losing that arch. You'll see that I'm holding the arch height now until I let it fall down. So go up, shorten the ankle or the foot, and then from there try to relax those feet, holding that position, and then let it drop from there.